Okay, so welcome to the new chapter on algebra, and in this chapter all we are going to do is discuss about simple equations. Now let us quickly go through the topics that we are going to cover in this chapter. First, we will have a quick look at the topics that we already covered in the earlier chapter in 6th grade, the topics that we covered in algebra and which involve the concept of a variable and an expression. Right, so we'll just revisit these topics for refreshing our memories. Then we will discuss about equation. What do we mean by an equation? How does an equation look like? What are the properties of an equation? And when I say an equation, we are talking about an algebraic equation. Then we also devote some time to understand what do we mean by a simple equation, because this entire chapter is on a simple equation. So we need to understand what is the scope of this simple equation, what do we mean by that. So that is what we'll discuss here. And then we discuss a very important concept of balance in an equation, and how can we use this concept of balance for going to the next step, which is solving the equations. In this we are going to use two methods to solve the equations. So first method will be by an observation. So you observe the equation and then use any of the addition, multiplication, subtraction or division, any of these four basic methods or four basic mathematical operations to solve an equation. And the second method to solve the equation would be transpose. What do we mean by the transpose, and how do we use that to solve the algebraic equation, simple equation in our case. Then we will look at an interesting thing, that if we have a solution, can we form an equation from that? And we will figure out what an interesting fact when we try to form an equation from a given solution. Finally, we will discuss about practical application of simple equations in day-to-day lives. So this is the scope of the topics that we are going to cover in this chapter. Please note that this chapter is intended to give you an idea of how to solve the equations, a very fundamental first step to start looking at algebraic equations and solving that. As you move towards higher grades, you will see more and more complex equations and how to solve them.